So
Where do we
say this?
Where do we start?
Let me just say this. The last thing in the world I would have imagined I would ever do on this program is tell people it's worth reading Steve Schmidt's Twitter feed from this past weekend or from any time.
I feel like we should start trying to fundraise from the Lincoln Project audience just hearing you say that.
Yeah, right? Someone clip that.
But I did recommend it to one or two of my friends just because...
I mean, you texted us about it over the weekend. Like, that's how much this moved you.
Yeah. The carnage involved was pretty pretty enjoyable. And it started with a couple of days ago, reports came out that Meghan McCain's new memoir, Bad Republican, sold less than 300 copies.
I can't see this because I'm blocked by her, by the way.
Like, if you go and self-publish, you're going to sell more than 300 copies.
I feel like it's probably not ever been the case that an author we've had on, even like of an obscure academic press book, has sold fewer than that.
Yeah, we've had people on who have books that do one print because each book was like $175 or something because they're so academic. Let me put it this way. Who's the Caboose sold more than 300 copies on DVD? I think annually it still does on DVD. And Meghan got a little bit defensive. And so she tweeted out, Mediaite had reported on this. And then she wrote, Bad Republican came out at Audible.com 7 months ago, exclusively on Audible, where it hit as high as number 2 on the Audible bestseller list. So let's just be clear. Audible had a deal for exclusivity. They tend to promote these things because they laid out cash.
Yeah, like the front page.
Exactly. Like, I mean, it's like if you got to, I would be curious if there's anything that was exclusively on Audible that didn't hit number 2. And it was the top nonfiction title the week it came out.
I love the specificity
on Audible.
of this.
On Audible.
Yeah.
Which I love, but I mean, if you're Audible, you're probably not liking getting thrown under the bus here because it kind of looks like maybe you shouldn't do this exclusivity thing because it's going to tank your...
Or whoever's in charge of buying the exclusivity ones, maybe they don't have their finger on the pulse. Additionally, it has strong reviews, 4.4 stars and over 1,000 ratings. Okay, so...
That's another obscure poll.
That's all well and good. All right. And so then what happens? She writes this, and what's the next thing? What triggers this whole thing?
With Steve Schmidt. I'm still on the... okay, so he... Basically, when was she calling him a pedophile, which makes this a scorched earth attack on him justified? Because that's the piece that I'm missing, right?
Something happened that set him off. And so he tweets out.
So that, just a warning, this is a vicious Twitter thread in which Steve Schmidt, former campaign manager for John McCain, tells...
well, you think it's that vicious just because that you have a good relationship with your parents. So Steve Schmidt comes out and says, I can explain this. Wait, do you have an answer?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Sorry.
Go ahead, Bradley. What do you?
Yeah. So apparently, in this whole scrum, Meghan liked a reply to Schmidt's tweet saying that he was being accused of running a pedo racket during the Trump administration.
Okay. So there we go. Okay. So then he goes.
But he responds and he goes, I can explain this. When I kicked Meghan McCain off of the 2008 McCain plane because of her outrageous behavior, I talked to her mom and explained what was happening and why. Cindy got weepy and said, quote, I just want to say I raised 2 good sons. And I said, everyone knows you did. Now, look.
Whoa.
I think it's clear that, right-wingers feel more pride in their male offspring. That's just the way it works in those type of households. But
But it's in response to her getting kicked off the campaign plane.
Oh, yeah. No.
So it's pretty clear what's
what's
going down. Yeah.
And then Steve Schmidt says, number 2, my daughter was 3 at the time, and I made a promise to myself I would make sure my number 1 priority in life would be raising a child that never acted like Meghan McCain, a spoiled, rotten, entitled bully. She is graduating high school next week. Mission accomplished. Everyone who's ever worked with Meghan McCain, from ABC, The View, Joy Behar, Whoopi Goldberg, and 1,000 others, have seen the unfiltered version of what the whole America has seen. That is why in a nation of 330 million people, 247 people have bought her book. Nothing new to learn. And then, of course, she likes this story about this tweet about Steve Schmidt being a pedo.
So that came after. So this was a preemptive, I'm going to talk about how your mother loves you least.
As your book fails.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, come on.
I respect it, honestly.
Honestly, I
don't
have total
respect it.
Steve
Schmidt's a scummy dude too.
Oh yeah, he's definitely a scummy. We're talking about the act, not the man.
Yeah.
The only reason why I have any disrespect for it is that this should have come years ago.
Oh yeah.
Before it was like in his, financial best interests. But let me just say that since we're talking about, I just want to say that I am proud of Steve Schmidt for a solution that risks the imagination of a new kind of possibility. He was one of Howard Schultz's, campaign managers.
Yeah.
So he goes, Meghan McCain, here's the story of the dumbest decision of my life. I had met briefly with Palin the night before, along with another top staffer. We agreed that and now I think not Sarah Palin, Meghan McCain has blamed Steve Schmidt for Palin being on and sullying John McCain. And this I appreciate even more. I think it's nice to know that Meghan McCain's mom doesn't love her and regrets.
On Mother's Day, he posted this tweet. He posted this tweet on Mother's Day.
I would imagine Cindy McCain finally says, I'm done having to live the lie. So, So Meghan McCain blames Steve Schmidt for tarnishing her father's wonderful reputation by forcing Sarah Palin on the ticket. Now, listen, everybody not everybody knows, but John McCain deserves every single bit of responsibility for Sarah Palin. Never got the credit he deserved for basically giving birth to baby Trump in the form of Sarah Palin. And so Meghan McCain, likes this thing. Let's go. So this is the one that's more accurate. So go up to number 1, go up. So Meghan McCain has been trying to have a conversation with me for almost 14 years. Once again, today she called me a pedophile. It's slander, it's disgusting, it's untrue, and it says everything about her. Here she is liking the tweet of a far-right liar and a piece of filth. Scroll down. After 14 years, he says, of abuse and attacks, today is the I decided to respond. I'm happy to keep the story going after this thread. It only gets better.
Because he did a few threads. I'm trying to wrangle all of them.
Yeah, it's tough. And he goes, I was the first adult that Meghan McCain ever counted that she heard the word no from. He told her she was
Totally
unimportant,
believable.
that the presidential election wasn't about her. I left the tarmac when she didn't make the plane because I explained to her the 5,000 people who were waiting to see her father speak and took the time it deserved to have him show up on time that way. John McCain, that was the way John McCain saw it. He was appalled by Meghan McCain's conduct on the campaign, appalled and embarrassed. The tantrums were beyond anything I have ever witnessed from any other human being. They were epic meltdowns that would test the range of Meryl Streep, Kate Winslet, Jodie Foster, and Anne Hathaway on their best
Don't
days.
pull them into this.
Steve, yeah.
He doesn't tag him at least. She goes on to just basically crap on Meghan McCain, and I think that's definitely worth.
So many adjectives. He's
Yes.
giving Glenn a run for his money.
The one I
But
like
the best stuff here is, all right. Newsflash: Meghan McCain is a whiny, bratty, self-entitled, spoiled kid who really has,
A reflection on her parents too, that she was raised that way.
Well, I mean, look, sometimes you never know how things are going. But let me just say this. One of the biggest one of the most egregious things about all of this is that we don't have failed daughter as a part of our lexicon the way we do fail sons. And we should. We should. Because Meghan McCain, and she should get credit for that if that catches on. But then
the founding fail daughter.
Schmidt goes into a couple of different threads, one of which shows that John McCain wanted Sarah Palin because he was a coward, because he knew his election was up. And I'll tell you something, it was obvious at the time too. McCain knew he was going to lose. And he made the only bet he could.
Yeah.
Or at least that he thought he could. And that was Sarah Palin. And he didn't care who she was.
It was a deal with the base, with the devil. And I mean, Obama was always going to win in this, post-Bush fury.
And it showed the cowardice that John McCain had politically.
Yeah.
He was a political coward who would put his finger up in the air, regardless of what you think about him as a POW or whatnot. He'd put his finger up in the air and he would go there. And to the extent that he was a maverick, that was all just a branding exercise. That was also completely rooted only in what was convenient at the time. And that's no different than any other politician, but he was venerated by people. So Schmidt goes on to talk about this, which is interesting. And Ari Berman and Mark Ames wrote a piece in The Nation about this in 2008, which got no attention at the time. It's getting more attention now. I had no interest whatsoever running a presidential campaign in 2008. One of my closest friends was running McCain's campaign, and John Weaver was the chief strategist. There were two factions in the campaign. There was a pro-democracy faction, and there was a pro-Russia faction. The pro-democracy faction was led by Weaver, and the pro-Russia faction was led by a Washington lobbyist who was in business with Paul Manafort.
Whoop.
Like Manafort, he had a Trump Tower residence. He was in charge of campaign finances and bankrupt the campaign through a series of unethical transactions and markups with Manafort and a company called 3EDC. The campaign was destroyed over a massive fight over John McCain's greatest blind spot. Willful or otherwise, Meghan McCain, this is the story of the man you call Uncle Rick. And it explains how we met. I'll attach a story from The Nation that I only read recently from 2008. It's spot on. Meghan McCain, your father tolerated his campaign chairman being in business and working for Putin through his association with, Yanukovych. Same as Trump.
I love the standalone tweet, same as Trump in all caps.
Yanukovych, as you probably have no idea, was Putin's puppet in Ukraine.
Yep.
The story of America corruption in Ukraine starts here. Starts in John McCain's operation, not Trump's. Meghan McCain, did you know your dad was taking on Oleg Deripaska's yacht in Montenegro for his 70th birthday by his top aide? It was a McCain guy, represented the interests of the Russian government in the Montenegro independence referendum. Weaver was aghast. This is why the campaign went kaboom in July of 2008, and your father went from front runner to middle seat on a Southwest flight with the National Press Corps gathered in New Hampshire waiting for him to drop out. This is when McCain called me and asked for his help. It's the opening scene of Game Change. And he goes on to talk about this. And people should read the story. But here is, do we know that this is not Photoshop?
Yes, because you can go on Meghan's Instagram. There's another picture of her at John McCain's grave, and the book is propped against
Now, this, I think, is somewhat cruel and unfair to Meghan McCain. She clearly posted a picture of her and her kid near her father's grave, which is, a solemn thing. She placed a copy of her book. I don't know if that's copy number 247 that's sold, or she got her own.
She signed it at least?
In front of his grave. Now, look, I imagine it's possible that you lose a parent and you're like, Dad, look at the book I wrote. Here it is.
I'm going to face it outward.
I'm going to face it outward so that you can see through it. You'll see the cover that way. Look at it through a mirror, Dad, and you'll see it the right way.
Actually, I'm seeing it backwards from behind.
But she posted this on Instagram, and I don't know. I guess if I was like, Dad, I wrote this book in honor of you. I want you to see it. maybe I would feel it necessary to use it as a publicity still on my Instagram account. But I like to think that, like, if I really did it, it was heartfelt. I was doing it for me, and for my dad. So there it is. Yeah, there's another shot. You got to get different angles. One where it closes up, and also I hope she put a link on there. Can you put a link? Can you make it an embeddable link on the Instagram to get to the?
Text of the book.
Maybe she
in
should
her
have
description.
a tear sheet she could have like taped to with some of the details of how to buy the book.
But
there's a picture of her and her mom.
Let me just say,
Happy Mother's Day.
I am for all of this, and I hope that it makes Steve Schmidt more toxic. This is a guy who, incidentally, as much as he hated Donald Trump, was willing to wheel out Howard Schultz, and had Howard Schultz had any traction, he would have hung in there for the millions of dollars he was being paid, and not just provide a solution that risks the imagination of a new kind of possibility, but also one that risks the reelection of Donald Trump. That could have also happened. So this is one of those situations where there's not enough popcorn in the world for me to have enjoyed that more.
Can I just say as a quick addendum, the John Weaver guy, who was the head of the pro-democracy faction for the McCain campaign, he resigned from the Lincoln Project in 2020 because he was accused of online harassment by 21 men, as well as offering personal and professional favors in exchange for sex to at least 10 of the men as well.
That's the accusation
That's the guy, right.
that Schmidt takes issue with, because he says none of that happened during the
campaign.
Right. But if it sticks to Schmidt, why wouldn't it stick to McCain?